If peace wants a bride, it can buy me with my father's pen. That's what I thought when the door opened, and the men in black stepped into the study that had always smelled like tobacco and lemon oil. The sea sat in the window like a blue witness, pretending not to hear. I stood beside the tall cabinet where ledgers slept, and I watched my father square his shoulders as if posture could make mercy. He didn't look at me. He looked at the space where decisions live. The messenger from the Moretti side didn't sit. He set a single page on the desk and kept his gloved hands at rest. His voice had the calm of a man who had measured today against a grave and found it cheap. "The families agree," he said. 7 days from now, in the cathedral, Luca will wed Isabella. The streets will be quiet. He didn't add my last name. He didn't need to. My father's thumb pressed into the wood, leaving a crescent that would never fully vanish. He signed with a steady stroke, then lifted the pen like a man who had just carved off a piece of himself and decided not to examine it. "You may leave," he told me when they were gone, and only then did his eyes meet mine. They were not cruel. They were tired the way old statues are tired. "It will hold the city together," he said, as if explaining why sailors tie knots. I nodded without meaning it. I climbed the stairs as if each step belonged to another woman. The hallway's rugs softened the sound of my refusal. In my room, the mirror didn't show my face. It showed the thin scar of a city that had been cut open and never quite learned how to close. Palermo had worn our war like a shawl for 2 decades. People learned to shop under gunfire, to baptize children while men counted bullets outside the church doors, to say good night, as if mourning were a rumor. Now the remedy was a dress. Sophia slipped in before the house could notice. She shut the door with her hip and took my hands. 2 hours, she whispered. "There's a driver. Florence by dawn. If not Florence, then Paris. You don't have to be there plaster over a crack." I walked to the wardrobe and opened it, as if I might find a different life on a hanger. The suitcase waited, half-packed for months with plain blouses I had never worn. A small key lay inside, a cheap token I had told myself meant possibility. I imagined a room of my own, a window that looked at strangers who never said my name, steam fogging a kettle, the relief of being unimportant. I could have stepped into that picture. It would have closed around me like warm water. Then I saw my father downstairs at an empty table, the chair opposite him forever kept for guests who arrived with offers and left with grief. I saw the old men who had begged him for a way to bury their sons with fewer gunshots. I saw the bodies pulled out of cars at dawn and rinsed off the steps before the fruit stands opened. I set the suitcase back in the dark and closed the door on it. "You can't outrun a promise that bleeds," I told her, and my mouth tasted like a coin. He arranged a meeting at the cathedral 2 days later, a quiet rehearsal of future obedience. I stood at the edge of candlelight with my back straight enough to break. He entered through the side door, a shadow carrying the shape of a man who had taught his body not to startle. His suit didn't make noise. His eyes did not apologize. The scar along his jaw looked like a sentence a knife had begun and then reconsidered. "Isabella," he said. "Not Miss, not Signorina, just the name I had learned to survive inside." "Luca," I answered, as if we had been classmates called to recite something no one ever understands. He did not offer his hand. I did not expect one. His voice was low and even, like a song that refuses to plead. "I didn't ask for this arrangement." "I wasn't invited to negotiate either," I said. "Then we start with honesty," he replied. We spoke about the order of a day that would belong to everyone but us. He preferred few photographs. I preferred fewer faces. He suggested a route from door to door that minimized the time our backs would be exposed. I suggested the florist my mother had loved before fear tore her away from colors. Through it all, he didn't come close. He kept a space between us like a line drawn on the floor for dancers who didn't want to collide. When he left, I didn't watch him go. I let the candles paint my wrists in gold, and I imagined telling my father no. Imagined the word leaving my mouth and finding no place to land. The week slid over us like a damp sheet. Tailors came and left. Lace arrived and was scolded for trying too hard. Strangers stared at me in the street as if I were a banner they had not agreed to wave. In the market, a woman pressed bread into my hands and whispered a prayer for sons. In the courtyard, a boy scuffed his shoes and asked what color happiness was. That night, I dreamed of a house with every window open and no one inside it. On the 6th evening, a storm moved in from the sea and pinned itself to the rooftops. The house listened. I sat in my father's study with a book I could not read while he made phone calls that sounded like confession. Thunder rolled around us as if the sky had found its drum. I closed my eyes and saw the cathedral doors open on my dress like a bright bruise. A shot cracked the air. The sound wasn't loud. It was accurate. Glass shivered. Sophia ran into the room and pulled me down behind the desk. Footsteps multiplied in the hall. Someone shouted a name, and someone else swallowed it. We waited while the house decided to breathe again. They dragged a body across the marble in the entryway. I didn't see it, but I heard the sound it made, the terrible syllable of wait and surrender. My father came to the threshold, calm except for the stain blooming at his cuff. He told me not to look, which meant he wished he could forget what he had seen. What does it mean, I asked. That someone prefers funerals to speeches, he said. His mouth was thin. It doesn't change mourning, Gwentoned. The messengers returned before dawn to check the routes. They smelled like rain and metal. They told us the church would be secured. They told us the streets would be washed. Washed, as if peace were a stain you could dilute, and not a wound you had to stitch. Sophia combed my hair while the city figured out where to hide its guns. Her hands shook exactly twice. I pretended not to notice. My dress was heavier than it looked. The veil felt like fog trapped in cloth. You could pretend you were inside a cloud if you didn't know clouds drowned fishermen. At the cathedral, the pews held men who said please to priests and said die to their enemies. The air tasted of lilies and dust. I walked toward a future that did not ask my permission. He waited at the altar, expressionless except for a small tightening at the corner of his mouth when a motorcycle backfired outside. Our fingers touched. His hand was warm. Mine was polite. The officiant spoke words that have survived wars because they wear armor made of tradition. We answered on cue. Rings circled our names like calm traps. Somewhere behind us, a child laughed and was shushed. Somewhere outside, a siren complained and was ignored. He leaned close enough that I could feel the sentence before he said it. Don't turn, he whispered. If they want a picture of fear, they won't get yours. So I kept my eyes forward. I breathed in candle smoke and a life I would not recognize tomorrow. We walked back down the aisle together. People clapped because that is what hands do when they don't know how to fix anything. On the steps, the sky held its reign as if pity were a craft it was still learning. Cameras clicked with a happiness that felt like a translation error. In the car, he left space between us wide enough for a confession. He looked at the road and not at me. From now on, he said, no one touches you. My people, your people, anyone who thinks your skin is a message to me. That ends. You assume touch always means power, I said. In our world, it does. Then change the world, I answered. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He let the sentence hang in the air like a bridge we might one day test. The gates of his estate opened and closed like a throat swallowing a vow. The house knew how to keep secrets. The ocean behind it tried to teach the rocks patience. He walked me to the room where I would sleep and stopped at the threshold. Rest, he said. Tomorrow we begin making the city believe us. I stood in the center of a bed that could have held all my doubts and not noticed. I took off my shoes and set them side by side like two servants who had finally earned a chair. The veil lay on a chair like a white wing that had chosen not to fly away. I lifted the window latch and let the night in. The sea smelled like salt and rain and the ache of old stories. The study downstairs still glowed behind a curtain. Somewhere a guard sneezed, apologizing to nobody. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and said the only prayer I could say without lying. Tomorrow I marry the man who broke my family's spine, I whispered, and I will not bend. The silence followed us home. It clung to my dress like the last guest who didn't know when to leave. The car stopped at the gates of his estate, and the doors opened into a night too still to trust. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked wet, as if the city had forgotten how to dry its tears. He walked ahead of me, every step measured, as though the ground might remember the weight of his enemies. I followed because there was nowhere else to go. The marble floors reflected our shapes, two strangers bound by a vow neither had wanted to speak. This way, he said. His voice was low, steady, neither kind nor cold. It sounded like an instruction given to the wind. The room was vast and pale. A chandelier hung above us, its crystals trembling faintly from the breeze. There were flowers everywhere, white roses, lilies, petals already curling at the edges. Beauty with a deadline. He stopped near the window, his hands in his pockets, the outline of a gun still visible beneath the jacket. I stood by the door, still holding my bouquet. It felt absurd, a relic from a ceremony already turning to ash. You can leave it on the table, he said. I set it down. The flowers sighed. Neither of us moved. The space between us felt heavy, like air underwater. You don't have to speak, I said. We already said enough vows for one lifetime. I don't speak unless there's reason, he answered. Tonight there isn't. He turned away, unbuttoning his jacket, folding it with the precision of someone who controlled everything he touched. I watched the movement deliberate, almost ritualistic. The kind of order a man keeps to hold back chaos. "There's another room across the hall if you prefer privacy," he said after a pause. "I'm not afraid," I told him. "I didn't assume you were." We stood there in the soft hum of the night. The sea murmured somewhere beyond the walls, a low, constant sound like a confession repeated to itself. He walked to the table, poured water from a crystal jug into 2 glasses, and placed one in front of me. "Drink. It's been a long day." The gesture was polite, detached, almost businesslike. I drank because refusing would have felt theatrical. The water was cold enough to remind me I was still alive. He watched me, not intrusively, but as though trying to read whether the treaty would hold through silence alone. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll meet with my sister. She'll help you learn the routines. The staff answers to her when I'm gone." "When you're gone? I'm not always here. Does anyone notice when you are?" I asked. His eyes flickered, a brief crack in composure, then steadied. "They notice enough." He crossed to the couch, removed his tie, and sat. "You may take the bed. It's yours." "It's ours," I corrected softly. "For tonight, everything in this house belongs to pretense," he said. I wanted to answer, but the words tangled before reaching my mouth, so I walked to the mirror instead. My reflection looked like a painting half-finished beautiful from afar, unbearable up close. I removed the veil, set it carefully on the chair, and let my hair fall loose. The pins scattered like tiny silver birds escaping a cage. Behind me, he exhaled. "I know what you think of me," he said. "You think I trade blood for control. You're not wrong. But I don't hurt what I claim to protect." Quote. I turned to face him. "And what am I? A claim?" His jaw tightened. "A promise," he said finally. "One I intend to keep." The chandelier light flickered once and steadied, casting both of us in a quiet gold. I thought of the church candles, the applause that sounded like pity, the look in my father's eyes when he handed me over to peace. I thought of how a woman could vanish behind her own name. "I don't need your promises," I said. "Good," he replied. "They've ruined enough people already." We stayed that way, 2 people occupying a room that refused to breathe. The clock ticked. The ocean moved. The air between us settled into something like respect, though neither of us would admit it. He stood and walked to the window. The moon rested on the water, pale and fragile. He didn't look at me when he spoke again. "You may sleep. I'll keep watch." "You think someone will come tonight?" "I always think someone will come." I believed him. I believed he had learned to live waiting for footsteps that never stopped at the door. I lay down, the sheets cool against my skin, the smell of salt lingering in the air. I heard him moving, checking the lock, adjusting the curtains, the quiet rhythms of a man who did not trust the dark to behave. The silence grew soft, almost tender. "Do you ever rest?" I asked. "Rest is for men who believe they're forgiven," he said. "And you're not?" "I'm not sure I want to be." Quote. The words lingered in the air, heavy but honest. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of rain return somewhere beyond the window. "Good night, Luca," I said quietly. He didn't answer at once. Then, in a voice low enough to almost dissolve, he said, "Sleep, Isabella. Tomorrow we'll begin pretending peace." And that was how our first night as husband and wife ended. No touch, no comfort, just 2 insomniacs sharing the same rain. The house woke before I did. I heard footsteps moving beyond the door. Slow, careful, rehearsed. Someone left a tray outside. Coffee, bread, a folded note, written in the same precise handwriting I had seen on the wedding documents. "Breakfast at 8. Someone will show you the garden. L." No signature, no flourish, not even a name. Just an initial, a mark of presence without intimacy. I sat at the window while the coffee cooled. The estate stretched toward the sea like a sleeping beast. Guards stood at the perimeter, their black suits blending with the morning mist. Every few minutes, one would lift a hand to an earpiece and murmur something I couldn't hear. This was Luca's world, orderly, efficient, and soundless. When I walked through the corridors, the staff lowered their eyes. No one addressed me by name. They moved like waves, constant, disciplined, loyal to invisible tides. I realized quickly that silence here was not fear. It was etiquette. At breakfast, Luca was already seated. He had removed his jacket, sleeves rolled to his forearms, reading a report with the focus of someone who could turn paper into command. The table was too long for 2 people, the food too elaborate for appetite. He didn't look up when I entered. "You're punctual," he said simply. "I was awake," I replied. He nodded. "You'll find that sleep comes slowly in this house." I sat opposite him. The sunlight spilled through the tall windows, cutting the air into warm, sharp lines. The sea glimmered beyond them, the only thing that seemed free. A woman entered quietly, his sister Amelia. She carried the kind of grace that hides steel underneath. "So," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "the city's favorite scandal finally eats breakfast." "Good morning to you too," I said. Luca looked up at her, calm but unmistakably warning. "Amelia," quote. She lifted her hands in surrender. "Just saying hello. It's not every day we have peace served with toast." Her voice held affection, but also curiosity. I could feel her studying me not unkindly, just carefully, as if deciding whether I was a liability or a story to tell later. When she left, Luca folded the report and turned to me. "You'll see her often. Don't answer questions you don't want repeated." "I thought this house valued silence," I said. "It does," he replied, "but even silence has echo." He pushed his plate aside and stood. "If you need anything, tell the steward. Don't leave the grounds without my word. And if I do, then you'll see how quickly peace ends." He said it plainly, not as a threat, more like a man describing gravity. I didn't answer. He left the room, leaving his coffee untouched. The hours after that unfolded slowly. Amelia kept her promise. She found me by the garden later that day, wearing a sun hat that looked too cheerful for this house. She led me past the hedges, through narrow stone paths lined with lavender. "This part used to belong to our mother," she said. "Luca keeps it because it reminds him of something clean." "He seems like someone who doesn't believe in clean things," I said. Amelia smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised. He believes in order. That's his version of purity. Gar." Her words stayed with me. That evening I found myself wandering the corridor outside his office. The door was half open. He was on the phone, voice calm, deliberate, speaking Italian too fast for me to follow, though the tone needed no translation. Authority, patience, cold fire. He ended the call, saw me in the doorway, and didn't seem startled. "You should rest," he said. "I was walking," I answered. He gestured to the chair near the wall. "Then sit." He hesitated. "Wouldn't that interrupt your control of the world?" A faint, tired smile crossed his face, the first I'd seen. "The world controls itself just fine. I only tidy the corners." For a moment, we were quiet. The lamp between us threw soft light across his desk files, pens, a framed photograph of a younger man I didn't recognize. His fingers brushed the frame briefly, then let go. "Your staff avoids my eyes," I said. "Do you tell them to?" "They prefer to keep their jobs," he said. "That's not an answer." He looked up, steady. "They were told to treat you with respect. Fear is often mistaken for that. So they fear you. They understand boundaries. It's safer that way. For them or for you." He didn't reply. Instead he said, "Do you need anything?" "Freedom," I said. He leaned back. "That's the only thing I can't give you yet." The honesty was unexpected. It disarmed me more than a lie could have. I nodded slowly, accepting the sentence without forgiving it. As I stood to leave, a faint crash echoed from the kitchen, the sound of glass breaking, followed by a sharp cry. Luca rose at once and crossed the room. I followed. In the kitchen, one of the servants stood frozen, a spilled tray at her feet, wine spreading like blood over the tiles. Her hands trembled. A man beside her, one of the guards, grabbed her arm, his face twisted in fury. "She ruined the shipment," he barked. Before I could move, Luca's voice cut through the chaos, quiet but final. "Let her go." The man froze, then obeyed. Luca walked to the broken glass, looked at the servant, and said evenly, "Get another bottle. Accidents happen. Don't let fear make them happen twice." The girl nodded near tears and fled. When he turned, he caught me watching. "You could have punished her," I said. "Punishment isn't control," he replied. "It's noise." Quote. He walked past me, leaving the smell of wine and steel in the air. That night, I sat by the window of my room, watching the sea grind itself against the rocks. The house had gone quiet again, but something inside it had shifted. I had seen the difference between a tyrant and a ruler. One takes pleasure in power. The other uses it like a tool he wishes he didn't need. For the first time, I felt curiosity instead of hatred. I whispered to the dark, not sure who I was talking to. Maybe enemies can have honor. And the night, loyal as always, kept my secret. The rain returned that night without warning. It fell in quiet sheets, heavy but polite, as if even the sky knew this house demanded silence. I sat near the window, a book open in my lap, the pages unread. The sea beyond the glass was a dark mirror, restless and full of secrets. He was late. He was always late. Since the wedding, I had learned his rhythm. He left before dawn, returned after midnight, moved through his own home like a rumor with a heartbeat. I had also learned the sound of his car, the low growl that announced him before the guards straightened. Tonight, the sound came later than usual. I closed the book and waited. The front doors opened below. Muffled voices followed. A command, a quick exchange, the sharp echo of boots across marble. Then silence. A moment later, I heard footsteps outside my room, slower, uneven. When the handle turned, I stood. Luca stepped inside, his shirt open at the collar, dark fabric soaked near the shoulder. His tie was gone, his jacket missing. The lamplight caught the edge of his sleeve, wet, red, blood. He froze when he saw me. "You're awake." I couldn't sleep. His voice stayed calm. "Go back to bed. What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you." I crossed the room. "You're bleeding." Quote, "It's handled." "It doesn't look handled." He sighed, the kind of exhale that comes from years of exhaustion. "It's not my blood." But when he pressed a hand against his shoulder, he flinched barely, but enough. I took a step closer. "Sit down." "Isabella." "Sit," I said, sharper than I intended. The word surprised us both. He stared at me for a moment, then dropped into the chair near the table. The rain filled the silence between us. I fetched the small case of supplies I had seen the housekeeper keep in the corridor closet: antiseptic, cloth, gauze, nothing fancy. When I turned back, he was unbuttoning his sleeve with one hand, movement slow and deliberate. The white cuff peeled away, revealing a gash along his arm, clean but deep, the kind that spoke of knives, not accidents. "I told you, it's nothing." "Then why do you look like pain owes you money?" I said quietly. He didn't answer. I knelt beside the chair, dipping a cloth into warm water. The blood spread quickly, thin and vivid, disappearing into the bowl. My fingers shook only once. He watched me silent. "You've done this before." "My father bled in front of me often enough," I said. "You learn what to do when the men in your life believe they're immortal." I pressed the cloth gently to the wound. He didn't flinch this time. "Who was it?" I asked. "Someone who forgot which side they were on." Quote, "And you reminded them?" "Permanently." The word dropped heavy between us. I looked up at him. His face was calm, expression unreadable, but his eyes, they looked older than they had the right to. "You kill people for peace," I said. "I kill to keep it from breaking." "That's not the same thing." "No," he said. "It isn't." I rinsed the cloth again, the water pink this time. The wound was already clotting. He had tied a strip of fabric around it earlier, tight enough to bruise. I replaced it with clean gauze, wrapping it neatly. When I finished, I sat back on my heels. "You should rest." He gave a low laugh, the first I had ever heard from him. It wasn't amusement, more disbelief. Rest doesn't come easy when your enemies pray better than you. I looked at the floor, then at him. "You're not a god, Luca." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "No, but too many people act like I am. It's dangerous to believe your own legend." "Then stop believing it." Quote. His eyes met mine, sharp, steady. "And what would I be without it?" "Maybe just a man," I said. The lamp hummed softly. The rain softened. For a heartbeat, I saw him not as the man who owned half the city, but as someone carrying ghosts he didn't invite. He looked down at his arm, flexed his fingers. "You shouldn't care." "Then stop bleeding where I can see," I answered. That earned the faintest curve of a smile. "You're braver than most people in this house." "What?" "I'm tired of being afraid." His Geislinge, fear keeps people alive. It also keeps them from living. The words hung between us, warm and quiet. For once, he didn't have an answer. He stood, the movement slow but steady. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the bandage or the argument?" "For both." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "If anyone asks, you didn't see me tonight." "I won't lie," I said. "I didn't ask you to." Quote. He disappeared into the hall, his shadow stretching long against the wall. The door closed. The rain had stopped. I sat on the floor, staring at the basin where the water had turned to rust. The house was quiet again, pretending nothing had happened. But something had. I had touched the truth of him, the fragile, human part hidden beneath all that control. And once you see the blood of your enemy, it's impossible to hate them the same way. I poured the water away, washed my hands, and whispered to the empty room. Maybe the wound wasn't his alone. The garden was quieter than the house. It always was. Here, the air moved like water, soft and sure. The sea breeze carried salt through the roses, turning their sweetness into something almost sad. Dew still clung to the edges of the leaves, trembling with the early light. I came here every morning because it was the only place where silence didn't feel like surveillance. The guards kept their distance. Even the birds seemed to understand that this was sacred ground, his mother's garden, Emilia had told me. Luca's mother had loved white flowers. She said they looked clean even when the world wasn't. I didn't expect him to be there. He was standing near the old fountain, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, the same arm I had bandaged weeks ago now free of bruises. He didn't notice me at first. He was staring into the water, motionless, as if listening to something only he could hear. When I stepped onto the path, the gravel gave me away. He turned, startled for a moment, then relaxed. "You're up early," he said. I thought the garden belonged to no one. He looked around, a faint smile crossing his face. "It belongs to memory. I only borrow it." The fountain whispered between us. The marble was cracked, its basin filled with petals and sky. "Your sister said your mother planted this," I said. "She did," he replied. "She used to say peace could grow if you gave it water and time." "Did it?" He shook his head. "She watered it with hope. My father watered it with blood." The sentence hung in the air, heavier than the clouds. I didn't speak. I just listened the way one listens to something fragile that might shatter if handled too soon. He sat on the edge of the fountain, elbows on his knees. "You want to know what happened to my brother?" He didn't ask. "You wanted to." He was right. I did. He stared at the fountain's rippling surface, eyes lost somewhere far away. His name was Matteo. He was 21. He wanted to be a teacher. He thought he could change things from inside. One night, a deal went wrong. Your father's men were there. I felt the air leave my lungs. He didn't look at me. "They said it was an accident," he continued, voice steady. "That he was at the wrong place. That he shouldn't have been carrying a gun. But he wasn't. He hated guns. He was just there, trying to pull someone out of the fire. They shot anyway." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words sinking into me like cold water. "My father didn't tell me," I whispered. "I know," Luca said. "He wouldn't. Because if he did, he'd have to remember that peace built on silence is still soaked in blood." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and damp earth. I wanted to speak, to defend something, but there was nothing left to defend. My father's name suddenly felt smaller than I'd ever imagined. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. He looked at me, then really looked. "Don't be. You weren't the one who pulled the trigger. But I was raised by the hand that ordered it." He nodded slowly, and I was raised by the man who answered. We sat there in the quiet, two airs of broken promises. The fountain gurgled softly, indifferent to human grief. A petal fell, landed on the water, and spun in slow circles before sinking. I followed it with my eyes until it disappeared. "I used to think hatred would keep him close," Luca said. "But it didn't. It only made the distance permanent." "What keeps him close now?" "Memory," he said. "And mornings like this, I wanted to reach for him but didn't. I didn't know what it would mean. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and said, 'Maybe your mother was right. Maybe peace can grow if someone just keeps watering it.'" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides pain under discipline. "You think you can grow it here?" "I can try. Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." He watched me for a long moment. The sunlight reached us through the trees, painting his face in gold and shadow. His eyes weren't as cold as they used to be. There was still caution there, but something else too, the start of belief. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than the wind. "You're different from what I expected." "Is that a compliment?" "It's a truth," he said, "and I don't offer those often." He stood, brushing dust from his hands. "I have to go. There's a meeting in town. Stay inside the walls." I nodded. "Always so many walls. They keep the wrong things out," he said, "and sometimes the right ones in." He left down the path, his footsteps fading beneath the sound of the sea. I watched until he disappeared behind the hedges. The garden felt different after he was gone, not emptier, just quieter in a way that felt safe. I turned back to the fountain, to the cracked marble and the drifting petals. The sunlight caught the water just right, and for a second, I saw two reflections side by side. Not enemies, not strangers, just two people carrying the same ghost. "Maybe peace begins when someone finally listens," I whispered. And for the first time, I thought the garden might be listening too. The invitation arrived on a silver tray, carried by a servant who looked too young to understand the danger of delivering peace. "Dinner with both families," it said. No names, no time, no explanation. Just a place, the Moretti dining hall. It wasn't a request. When I told Emilia, she sighed. "They want to prove the truce works," she said, "like showing a caged animal how well it's eating." Quote. That evening, the house glowed brighter than usual. Candles in every hall, guards at every door. The scent of polished wood and wine hung in the air. The table stretched across the room like a battlefield disguised as hospitality. Luca stood near the head of the table, dark suit perfectly pressed, expression unreadable. He looked at me when I entered, not long, just enough to anchor me in the noise. "Stay close," he said under his breath. "I wasn't planning to run," I replied. "You never planned to," he said, and that almost sounded like humor. One by one, they arrived, men in expensive suits and worn expressions, women with jewelry heavy enough to bruise. My father came last. He greeted Luca with the kind of politeness that belonged on tombstones. "Don Moretti," he said, extending a hand. "Mr. Romano," Luca replied. "I appreciate your presence." "Peace deserves witnesses," my father said. "Or guards?" Luca answered. The handshake lasted a second too long. When we finally sat, I found myself between Luca and Emilia. My father sat across from me, surrounded by men who once followed his word into blood. The room hummed with tension, forks clinked like distant gunfire. Wine poured like old debts. At first the talk was polite. Trade, supply routes, the rebuilding of the port. But underneath the words was suspicion, the kind that doesn't shout, only waits. Then one man from my father's side, Marco Santini, decided to break the silence. He was drunk enough to be brave, sober enough to be cruel. "So this is peace," he said loudly, lifting his glass. "Romano's daughter in the enemy's bed. The city must be sleeping better already." The laughter that followed was brittle, forced. My father's eyes flashed warning, but Marco wasn't done. He leaned forward, eyes on Luca. "Tell me, Don Moretti, how does it feel, sharing a table with the man whose family killed your brother? Or do you find comfort in taking his daughter instead?" The words sliced through the room. Every sound stopped. Even the candles seemed to hesitate. My hands clenched under the table. I wanted to speak, but my throat locked. Luca didn't move. He didn't blink. He just looked at Marco with the stillness of someone deciding which silence to use. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost gentle. "Say that again." Marco smirked. I said. He never finished. Luca rose, slow and deliberate. The chair barely made a sound. His shadow stretched across the table, long and certain. "You came here tonight because peace allowed it," he said. "Don't mistake permission for forgiveness." Marco's smirk faltered. Luca's gaze shifted to my father. "You brought your men under my roof. You have my respect. But if one of them forgets his manners again, I'll remind him permanently." Quote. He turned back to Marco. "Apologize." The man swallowed. It was a joke. "Apologize," Luca repeated, softer, deadlier. Marco's face went pale. "My apologies, Mrs. Moretti," he muttered, eyes dropping to his glass. The sound of his voice using my new name sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of something I couldn't name. Luca sat back down. The tension loosened, but the silence was absolute. My father cleared his throat, lifted his wine, and said, "To peace." No one echoed him. Dinner continued, though no one tasted it. Conversations returned in small, nervous bursts. I kept my eyes on the table, unsure whether to feel humiliated or protected. When the plates were cleared, Emilia whispered to me, "He's never defended anyone at that table before." "Then why me?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "Because even walls need something worth standing for." Later, as the guests departed, I lingered in the hall, watching my father shake Luca's hand again. Their smiles were made of ice. My father's eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of something like regret, then gone. When the last car rolled away, I turned to leave, but Luca's voice stopped me. "You shouldn't have to listen to that," he said quietly. "I've heard worse," I replied. "I know, that's why I stopped him." I looked at him then, really looked, not the Don, not the enemy, just the man standing in the glow of a half-extinguished chandelier. His cuff still stained faintly with wine. "Why?" I asked. "Because disrespect spreads faster than war," he said. "And because you're my wife, not a message." The way he said wife steady, without ownership, reached something deep inside me. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded once. "Don't thank me. It's what should have always been." He started to walk away, but paused, voice lower now. "You handled it well. I did nothing. Sometimes nothing is the hardest thing to do." Quote. And then he was gone, leaving the scent of wine and rain behind. I stood alone in the empty hall, the echoes of the dinner still humming in the walls. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel lonely this time. For the first time since my wedding, I felt something break inside me, not pain, not fear, but the brittle edge of hatred finally cracking. That night, before sleep claimed me, I whispered into the dark, "Maybe safety doesn't need walls. Maybe it just needs someone who stands up." It had been raining for days. Not the violent kind, Not thunder and chaos, but a constant, quiet rain that blurred the world into shades of gray. The sea outside had turned a dull silver, its waves heavy, like the breath of something old and patient. In the mornings, the servants moved through the halls with soft shoes and softer voices. Even the guards seemed quieter, their radios muted. The entire house existed between heartbeats. Luca stayed home more often now. The business meetings came to him instead of the other way around. Men arrived in black cars and left without smiling. When they left, he would walk the length of the corridor twice, as if counting his ghosts. We spoke more these days, not often, not easily, but more. At first, it was small things. The coffee's too strong. The roses are dying. Quote. The sea's rough today. Words like stones we placed between us to cross the river of silence. On the third night of rain, I found him in the library. The fire had burned low. He sat in a leather chair, a glass untouched beside him, papers spread across his lap. The lamplight was soft, golden, tracing the line of his jaw, the scar that no longer frightened me. He didn't look up when I entered. You don't sleep, he said. You either. I try. It doesn't listen. Quote. I walked to the shelves, touching the spines of books lined like soldiers. What do you read when you can't sleep? Reports, he said. That's not reading. That's bleeding on paper. He glanced up, a faint smile touching his mouth. Maybe that's the only language I know. I turned toward him. Do you ever read anything that isn't about war? He thought for a moment, then said, Once. A book of poems my mother loved. I didn't understand them. Quote. Do you still have it? He nodded to the top shelf. I reached for it, old leather, edges worn. When I opened it, the pages smelled faintly of smoke and salt. One verse had been underlined. The ink faded. I read it aloud. Even in ruins, love plants its flag. He looked away. She used to say that when she watered the garden. We both went quiet. The rain pressed against the windows. Steady, patient. Tell me, I said finally, do you believe in forgiveness? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted to the fire. No, forgiveness feels like pretending nothing happened. I can't do that. So you live with ghosts instead. I live with truth, he said. It hurts less when you stop asking it to change. I stepped closer to the fire. I used to pray for forgiveness. Now I think I just prayed for understanding. He looked at me then, long, searching. Did you get it? Maybe. But it came wearing your face. Quote. The air shifted. The fire cracked once, sharp, then fell quiet again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You shouldn't look at me that way. What way? Like I could save you. I don't need saving, I said. Neither do you. He gave a low laugh, quiet and strange. You think we're the same? I think we're both tired of being names people use to explain their fears. His hand rested against the armrest, fingers curling loosely. For a long moment, I watched the way the light caught the scars across his knuckles, small, pale lines that told stories no one ever wrote. I don't remember the last time someone talked to me without wanting something, he said. What do you want, Luca? Peace, he said, then softer, and maybe to believe it's real. The rain grew louder, a curtain of sound closing us in. Without thinking, I reached across the small table and placed my hand over his. It wasn't an act of comfort, more like a question that didn't need words. His hand was warm, steady, but I felt him hesitate. Then, slowly, he turned his palm upward, fingers meeting mine halfway. Neither of us spoke. The moment was fragile, thin as glass. I could feel his pulse, quiet and controlled. I realized then that even power could tremble. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You should be careful. I don't know how to be gentle. Then learn, I said. We've both had enough of violence. He didn't move away. For a while, we just sat there, the rain drumming steady rhythm against the glass, the fire dimming to a heartbeat glow. I don't know how long it lasted, a minute, maybe an eternity. But when I stood to leave, he didn't stop me. As I reached the door, he said quietly, Good night, Isabella. I turned back. His eyes met mine, steady, unguarded. Good night, I whispered. Don't let the ghosts talk too loudly. He almost smiled. They listen better when it rains. I left him there, surrounded by books and memories, the storm singing its slow, sad lullaby outside. That night, for the first time since our wedding, I fell asleep easily. And when I dreamed, it wasn't of fear. It was of rain, warm, endless, and kind. It started with thunder that wasn't thunder. The night had been calm, the kind of calm that hums just before a wound opens. I was in the library, reading by the fire, listening to the rain. The sound had become my lullaby these days. Safe, familiar. Then the world cracked. A roar, a tremor through the floor, glass exploding inward. The lamps shuddered. My body reacted before thought I hit the ground, heart hammering, smoke flooding the air. Somewhere outside, men shouted orders, boots pounding across wet stone. I crawled toward the window, coughing. The garden was a blur of fire and rain orange against silver. Part of the eastern wall was gone, blown open like a ribcage. Luca's voice cut through the chaos. "Secure the perimeter." He appeared in the hallway, coat soaked, blood on his temple. His eyes found me instantly. "Are you hurt?" "No," I gasped. "What happened?" He didn't answer. He pulled me up, fingers tight around my wrist, guiding me down the corridor. The smell of gunpowder followed us, heavy, metallic, cruel. Guards rushed past, weapons drawn, faces pale. When we reached his office, he turned to one of them. "Lock down the house. No one leaves. Wait." The man nodded and disappeared. Luca closed the door, his breath sharp, eyes darker than I'd ever seen. "It was a bomb," he said. "Someone got inside." Inside. That word landed like a stone in my stomach. Who? We don't know yet. He moved to the safe behind the painting, spun the dial, pulled out a pistol. His movements were fast, automatic. I'd seen him angry before, but not like this. This wasn't rage, it was betrayal, cold and methodical. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of the guards stepped in, holding a folder, his hands shaking. "We found this near the service gate, sir." Luca took it, opened it. A piece of paper, wet, half burned with a crest I knew too well. The Romano insignia. My breath caught. I know what it is." He looked at me, and for the first time since our wedding, I saw distance. The kind that wasn't built from choice, but from instinct. His gaze was still calm, but it no longer met mine. It slid past, as if looking through me was easier than believing what he saw. "He didn't." "I know," he said quietly, but the way he said it didn't sound like knowing. It sounded like postponing. He turned to the guard. "Double the watch. No one enters her room without my word." "My room?" I stared at him. "You're locking me in?" "For your safety." "For your silence, you mean?" He said nothing. That silence was worse than any accusation. "Luca, you don't believe I had anything to do with this?" He finally looked at me, not with anger, not even doubt, but something colder. "Right now, I can't afford belief." The words hit harder than the explosion. Before I could speak again, he opened the door. 2 guards waited outside. "Take her upstairs," he ordered. "Stay at the door." I stepped toward him, but he turned away, already reaching for the radio on his desk. Orders filled the air, clipped, sharp, emotionless. I wanted to scream that I wasn't the enemy, but the look on his face stopped me. It wasn't hatred. It was fear. Not of me, of what he might have to do if he was wrong. They led me back to my room. The lock clicked behind me. The house, once alive with quiet confidence, now breathed like something wounded. I pressed my ear to the door. Voices moved below, muffled but urgent. I caught fragments. "Inside job, signature explosive, message left." I went to the window. Rain washed the smoke from the garden, revealing dark shapes moving among the hedges. For a moment, lightning flashed, and in its brief light, I saw the fountain where we had spoken of peace. It was shattered. I sank to the floor. My hands shook, not from fear, but from betrayal, not his, but the world's. Every time I thought I had found solid ground, it cracked open beneath me. Hours passed. Or maybe it was minutes. Then the door opened. Luca stood there, expression unreadable. His shirt was torn, blood smeared along his sleeve. "I came to see if you're hurt," he said. "I'm fine. Trapped, but fine." He stepped closer, eyes searching my face for something he couldn't name. "The evidence doesn't prove anything, but it points, badly." "Tome." He didn't deny it. "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "I know." "Then unlock the door." He hesitated. "Not yet." Something in me broke, then quiet, invisible but final. "You promised," I whispered. "You said no one would touch me, but you did." His jaw tightened. "This isn't touch. It's precaution. It feels the same." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, I saw the man beneath the title again, exhausted, cornered, bleeding. I almost pitied him. Almost. "I'll find who did this," he said. "And if it's someone from your father's house, then what?" He didn't answer. He left before I could stop him. The lock clicked again. The rain continued outside, relentless. I sat by the window until dawn, watching the sky lighten, the smoke fade. The garden was in ruins, the fountain gone, the white roses burned to ash. Peace, it seemed, had finally shown its true face, not a promise, but a pause before the next wound. When the first light broke through the clouds, I whispered into the empty room, "You wanted proof, Luca. Now you'll see what trust costs when it dies." The house had forgotten my voice. For 3 days, the only sounds I heard were footsteps outside my door and the rain clawing at the windows. No one spoke to me. Meals came on a tray. The lock clicked twice, once when they brought it, once when they left. The silence was a punishment worse than accusation. I spent hours tracing the lines of the wallpaper, the cracks in the ceiling. Every inch of this place had been built for control, even the beauty of it was designed to hold people still. I wondered if the walls listened to every lie told inside them, if they remembered who first whispered peace and meant obedience. The explosion had torn a hole in the east wing, but it had left something bigger, broken the thin thread of trust I had thought we were weaving. I stopped waiting for him. But on the third night, just after the rain slowed, I heard footsteps that didn't belong to guards. Slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. The key turned. He stepped in, shadows under his eyes, the same suit he'd worn the day of the blast. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too many choices that all felt wrong. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I said, "You didn't need a key. You already locked me in." He closed the door behind him. I came to unlock something else. I stayed silent. He took a step closer. We found the man who planted the charge. My heart stopped. Who? One of Santini's men. He confessed before he died. Then it wasn't. No. His voice was quiet. It wasn't you. I wanted to feel relief. Instead, I felt nothing. Just the cold, hollow ache of a truth arriving too late. "You knew that already," I said. "Yes." The word fell like a blade. "Then why keep me here?" He looked at the floor. "Because knowing and trusting aren't the same thing." I took a step forward. "And which of those hurt more?" He finally met my eyes. "Trust, Guan." The honesty in his voice stole the breath from me. He ran a hand through his hair. I told myself it was precaution, that it was logic, but it was fear. I've built an empire on not needing anyone. And then you arrived, and suddenly everything that mattered could burn in one night. "You think caring makes you weak," I said. "It does," he whispered. "In my world it does. In mine too," I said. "But I'm tired of being strong for people who confuse love with leverage." Quote. He laughed softly, not out of joy, but recognition. "You sound like someone who's lived my life." "Maybe I have," I said. "Different walls, same cage." He looked at the locked door behind him, then back at me. "You can leave if you want." "I don't want permission," I said. "I want truth." He nodded slowly, as if surrendering. "The truth is, I knew you were innocent. But the moment I saw your crest in that folder, something broke in me. I saw my brother's face again. I saw everything I'd tried to bury. And for 1 second, I hated you for being the easiest person to blame. I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. You could have just told me that. I don't know how to talk without sounding like a threat." "Then stop talking like Don Moretti," I said, "and start talking like Luca." He blinked, as if the name itself pulled him somewhere human. "Luca," I said again, slower. "I'm still here, even after what you did." He took another step. The distance between us was barely the length of a breath. "You shouldn't be," he said. "But I am." Something fragile shifted in his expression. The walls that had held his control for years began to crack. "I don't know how to love without destroying what I touch," he whispered. "Then don't destroy it," I said. "Protect it differently." He exhaled, the sound almost like a prayer. "You forgive too easily." "No," I said. "I just understand what fear does to people. You taught me that." Quote. He stood there, silent, as if waiting for permission to breathe. Then slowly, he reached out. His hand hovered near my face, not touching, just trembling in the space between want and restraint. "I don't deserve this," he said. "Neither do I answered. "But here we are." He finally let his fingers brush my cheek. The touch was light, careful, like he was testing whether I was real. The world outside faded. No rain, no guards, no war. Just this room, and 2 people learning how to exist without armor. He whispered, "If I lose you, everything ends." I met his eyes. "Then stop protecting me, and start loving me." The sentence hung in the air, too heavy to fall. He closed his eyes, forehead resting against mine for the briefest moment. Not a kiss, not yet, just a confession in the shape of silence. When he stepped back, there was something new in his face. Not peace, not certainty, but the beginning of both. He unlocked the door. "You're free," he said quietly. "I was never the prisoner," I replied. "You were." He smiled small, tired, but real, and left without another word. I stood there long after he was gone, the echo of his touch still warm on my skin. The rain had finally stopped. The air smelled clean, fragile, and for the first time I believed peace might not be a lie. The city never slept, but that night it forgot how to breathe. Palermo looked washed out under the sodium lights, streets shining like scars after the rain. I had left the house for the first time in weeks, escorted by 2 guards in silence. Luca had insisted it was safe. "The city owes me calm," he'd said, "but peace built on fear is always borrowed time." We stopped outside the chapel on Via Marina, a small stone building where donations were being gathered for the orphans Luca's mother had once sponsored. Emilia was supposed to meet me there. I remember thinking the air smelled wrong, too sweet, like flowers hiding rot. The driver opened my door. The world tilted. Something hard struck the back of my neck. A flash of white, then nothing. When I woke, the air was cold and metallic. The floor beneath me was concrete. The room smelled of oil and rust. My wrists were bound. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above, steady and cruel. I blinked until shapes took form: crates, shadows, a single chair. And him. Reed. He leaned against the wall, sleeves rolled, cigarette between his fingers. He looked almost casual, the way men look when they've decided the rules no longer apply. Finally, he said, "I was beginning to think the Queen of Peace slept too well. Where am I?" My voice was hoarse. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. "Where all good stories end, the place your husband forgot existed." The name husband sounded like poison in his mouth. "You worked for him," I said. "I built him," Reed replied. "Every inch of that empire has my fingerprints on it. I ran the docks, the accounts, the men. While he played saint, I cleaned his messes, and then he called me reckless." He took a drag of his cigarette, the tip glowing like a tiny, angry sun. "When Matteo died," he continued, "Luca wanted to burn your father's world to the ground. I stopped him. I told him revenge isn't power, control is. And what did he do? He buried the war, married you, and called it peace." Quote. His tone turned bitter. "I kept the war alive for him, and this is how he thanked me." I stared at him, trying to find a trace of the man Luca had once trusted, but all I saw was hunger, the kind that eats its own reflection. "You tried to kill him," I said. He laughed. "No, I tried to wake him. A man like Luca shouldn't sleep next to mercy. It dulls the edge." He flicked ash onto the floor. "You made him soft. Maybe that's what makes him strong," I said. Reed's smile vanished. "He's forgotten who he is. You'll remind him." Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled a small phone from his pocket, pressed a button, and tossed it onto the table. The screen lit up Luca Moretti flashing across it. He leaned close, the cigarette smoke curling around his words. "He'll answer, he always does." The line clicked open. Luca's voice came through, calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd already imagined this call. "Reed, still recognize me?" Reed said. "I thought your peace made you deaf. I should have known it was you. You should have thanked me," Reed snapped. "I did what you couldn't. I reminded the city who you were." Luca's silence on the other end was dangerous. I could feel it, even through the air. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Reed smiled, glancing at me. "I want what I built. My half, my respect, and maybe a little proof that you still have fire in your veins." Luca's tone darkened. "Let her go." Reed chuckled. "You always talk like commands are prayers." The phone shook slightly in his hand. "You know what will happen if you touch her." "That's the point," Reed said. "You'll come to get her. You'll remember what it feels like to bleed for something." He leaned toward the phone, voice low. "Come alone, Luca. The warehouse by the port. Midnight. Or I'll send her back in pieces of peace." The line went dead. The silence after was heavy, final. Reed turned toward me, his expression almost gentle. "Don't look so scared. He'll come. He always comes when there's blood in the water." He walked away, boots echoing against concrete. I could hear him humming a tune, something slow, haunting. When the door slammed shut, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. My hands ached against the rope. My mind spun with everything unsaid. Luca would come. I knew it. But not for the reason Reed believed. He wouldn't come for vengeance. He would come for truth and maybe for me. I tilted my head back against the wall, listening to the faint sound of waves hitting the pier outside. The sea was always there, watching every mistake humans made. "Don't be late," I whispered into the dark, not sure if I was talking to Luca, or to the part of me that had finally decided to trust him. The The light above flickered once, then steadied cruel, bright, endless. And in that harsh light, I realized something terrifying. Peace had never been real. It had only been the pause before someone pulled the trigger again. The sound came first, the slow growl of an engine cutting through the storm. It was almost midnight. The sea outside the warehouse roared like an angry god, waves slamming against the pier. I had lost track of time, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. The ropes around my wrists had cut small wounds into my skin, but fear had dulled the pain. Then headlights cut through the slats in the door. One car, alone. Reed's men stirred, weapons shifting, cigarettes crushed beneath boots. The air grew tight, electric. He's here. The words repeated in my mind like prayer. The door opened. Rain poured in, soaking everything: the floor, the crates, the men. And through that wall of water, Luca stepped inside. He looked like the storm had followed him there, coat black with rain, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes colder than the sea behind him. "Let her go, Reed," he said. Reed laughed. "You actually came alone. I always keep my promises." Reed circled him slowly. Still the same man who thinks control is courage. "No," Luca said. "Just a man who's done being afraid." The air cracked. Gunfire. It was chaos, flashes of light, echoes swallowed by thunder, the smell of gunpowder mixed with salt and iron. I dropped to the floor, rolling behind the chair. One of Reed's men fell beside me, blood splattering the wall. I could hear Luca's steady shots, measured, deliberate, never panicked. But there were too many. I crawled toward the broken crates near the far wall. A piece of metal caught the light, a shard from the earlier blast, sharp enough to cut rope. My fingers shook as I sawed through it. The fibers tore. Pain shot through my wrists. Then freedom. "Luca," I shouted, though I wasn't sure if he could hear me through the rain and gunfire. Reed heard. He turned, pistol raised, eyes wild. "She was never worth saving," he shouted. I didn't think. I lunged, grabbing the fallen guard's weapon. The shot that left my hand wasn't clean, but it found flesh. Reed staggered, shock flashing across his face. In the same second, Luca's bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The echo rolled through the warehouse like thunder that didn't want to end. Silence. Only the rain. Luca dropped his gun and rushed toward me. For a moment, I thought he looked more like a man than the legend they whispered about, breathing hard, eyes wide, a streak of blood on his neck. "You're bleeding," I said. "So are you." We both laughed, weak, exhausted, disbelieving. He reached for me, his hand trembling as it brushed my face. "I told you not to be afraid," he whispered. "I'm not," I said. "Not anymore." That's when I saw it, the dark stain spreading across his side. "Luca." He followed my eyes, then shook his head. "It's nothing." "It's always nothing until it's everything," I said. He smiled faintly. "You sound like me." I tore a strip from my dress and pressed it against the wound. He hissed in pain but didn't pull away. His hand came up, covering mine, holding it there not for pressure but for connection. "I thought I lost you," he said. "You almost did." Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Water dripped through holes in the roof, falling between us in thin, silver lines. Behind him, Reed stirred, still alive. He crawled toward his gun, blood smearing the floor. I saw it before Luca did. "Luca!" He turned. The shot came. The sound was deafening. Then silence again. Reed fell first. The gun clattered from his hand. His body stilled. The storm outside raged on, but inside, everything stopped. Luca swayed. I caught him before he fell completely, his weight heavy in my arms. "Stay with me," I whispered. His breath was shallow, his voice rough. "You said once I should stop protecting you." I did. Turns out I don't know how. Tears blurred my vision. I held him tighter. "Then don't learn, just stay alive." He smiled, barely there. Always giving orders now. Only the ones that matter. Outside, sirens began to wail, faint through the rain. I didn't know if they were ours or theirs. I didn't care. I just needed him to keep breathing. He reached up, his hand brushing my cheek again. "You were right," he whispered. "About what? That peace isn't a lie. It just needs someone stubborn enough to believe in it." And then his eyes closed. I pressed my forehead to his, the rain mixing with tears I didn't try to hide. "Then believe with me," I said. "Just this once." His chest rose again, weak, but steady. Relief flooded through me, fierce and cold. The doors burst open. Emilia's voice shouted orders. Men poured in. But I didn't move. I stayed there, holding him, until they pulled us both out into the storm. The rain didn't feel cruel anymore. It felt clean. We left the warehouse behind the ghosts, the blood, the old war, and stepped into the night where the city lights blurred into something almost kind. That was the night the storm finally broke. And somewhere between the thunder and the silence, I realized I hadn't just survived him. I had found him. When morning finally came, the rain had gone. The world outside the window looked washed the sky a pale, forgiving blue. The sea calm for the first time in months. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. He was still asleep when I opened my eyes. The room was white, quiet, softened by the rhythm of the machines that kept time better than any clock. The doctors had said he would live. The bullet had missed the lung by a fraction, a miracle measured in centimeters. I hadn't left his side all night. His hand was wrapped in mine, warm but still, the way something fragile feels just before it wakes. I watched the sunlight crawl across the floor, inch by inch, until it touched his face. It made him look younger, as if all the years of war and grief had melted with the dawn. When he stirred, it was small, a shift in breath, a faint tightening of his fingers around mine. "Still here?" he murmured, voice rough, sleepy. "Where else would I be?" His eyes opened then, slow, careful, like someone remembering how to see. They were lighter in daylight, still sharp, but human. "You should rest," he said. "You look worse than I do." I smiled through the ache in my chest. Impossible. He tried to sit up, grimaced, and I leaned forward, helping him. "Slowly," I said. "The world can wait a few more minutes." "The world never waits." "Then let it learn." For the first time, he laughed real, low, quiet. It sounded like something he hadn't done in years. We sat like that for a while, listening to the sea outside, the waves brushing against the rocks in soft applause. Finally, he said, "Reed's gone. Amelia told me they found him at the docks. No survivors." I nodded. "The war's over." He looked away, eyes on the horizon. "There's no such thing as over, just quieter." "Then let's choose quiet," I said. He turned to me, searching my face for the lie. There wasn't one. "I can't stay here," he said. "The city will always remember my name." "Then forget it," I whispered. "Leave it behind, leave all of it." He looked at me, as if trying to see the weight of what I was offering or asking. "Do you know what that means?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It means freedom. Freedom costs everything. Then it's worth it." The silence that followed was soft, fragile. Then he reached for me, not with the urgency of someone who needs to be saved, but with the steadiness of someone who's finally decided to live. "Come with me," he said. "He didn't hesitate. He already did." He smiled, tired but true. "You know what they'll call us? Runaways." He shook his head. "Ghosts. People who refuse to die in the stories written for them." Outside, the sky grew brighter, the line between sea and heaven almost invisible. He closed his eyes again, resting. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, feeling the pulse under my fingertips, quiet, certain. "You once told me peace was borrowed," I said softly. "Maybe it doesn't have to be." He didn't answer, but his hand tightened around mine. That was enough. Hours later, when Amelia came in, she found us by the window. Luca had insisted on standing, weak but stubborn. We watched the sunrise together, three people who had seen too much night. Amelia spoke first. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere without walls," I said. Luca smiled faintly. "Somewhere the rain means nothing but rain." She nodded, eyes shining. "Then go before the city remembers how to want you back." When she left, he turned to me. "Do you think we can really leave it all?" I looked out at the horizon, the thin line of gold where light met water. "We already did. The rest is just distance." Quote. He reached into his jacket, still draped on the chair, and pulled out a small item wrapped in cloth, his ring. The same one he'd worn the day we married, cold and heavy with duty. He handed it to me. "Keep it," he said. "Not as a promise, as proof." "Of what?" "That even men like me can change the ending." I held it tightly in my palm. "Then let's write a new one." We left that afternoon. The doctors protested, Amelia argued, but Luca simply said, "We're done being remembered." Quote. We drove north, along the coast, the sea always to our left, endless and blue. The city faded behind us, its towers, its ghosts, its grief. At the first sign of dawn the next day, we stopped by the cliff road overlooking the water. The air smelled clean. He stood beside me, wind catching his coat, eyes on the horizon. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, for the first time I don't owe anyone anything." I took his hand. "Not even me?" He smiled, slow and soft. "Especially not you." We stood there until the sun climbed high enough to warm our faces. The light touched everything, the rocks, the sea, our joined hands. And in that fragile glow, I realized something simple, almost sacred. Peace isn't the absence of war. It's the moment you stop running from yourself. He turned to me, eyes gentle. What now? Now, I said. We live. He nodded, and for once didn't argue. The wind carried the scent of salt and promise. The road stretched ahead, long and open. We started walking, leaving footprints that the tide would soon erase, but for the first time, we weren't afraid of forgetting. Behind us, the city slept. Before us, the world waited. And somewhere between them, two souls who had spent a lifetime surviving finally began to live.